Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Selling Fort Collins. I'm here with the CEO of New Belgium, Shaun Belongie. Shaun, how you doing?
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And, we go back how many years? How many years was it that you bought your house?
6+ years.
6+ years. So it doesn't seem like it's been that long, actually.
It's flown by and it's been very long.
Yeah. We've done a lot in that time frame. But before we get there, let's talk about where you started. And then we talked a little bit before we started recording here about, some things that I don't know about you, even though we've known each other for a while. But I want to go back to, where'd you grow up? Let's start there.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town called Beaver Dam, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Home of 15,000 busy beavers near Madison, Wisconsin. So a lot of beaver iconography. But it was a great town to grow up in, and also a town where I felt like I really, wanted to kind of spread my wings and find out what else was out there. So, as soon as I graduated high school, I was kind of out the door looking for the next adventure.
Right. What kind of things were you into in high school?
So I was a musician, and actually, kind of fun fact, I started college at a music conservatory. And I was a saxophone performance major, and not just, jazz saxophone, classical saxophone, which you may be asking yourself, is there such a thing? That would have been a good question before I started to ask. And yes, there is a thing, but very few people actually are successful in that. And fortunately, I had a very kind professor who pulled me aside, a month or two in and said, "Hey, do you like practicing 8 hours a day?" And I said, "No, I hate practicing. Practicing is the worst." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Cool. Well, I've been doing this for 30 years and I practice every day for 8 hours. And that's what you're going to have to do to make it." And I said, okay. What other options are there?
What percentage of people would say yes to that question?
You have to really love that,
Sure.
that thing to do it. So anyways, ended up transferring schools to Marquette University in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And, saxophone was definitely not my thing, although I still love to play, onto something else.
So you were creative.
Yes, kind of.
And knowing a little bit about your kids are creative too. I think you've passed that on to them. And so you started showing that in high school with an interest in music. So when did you start showing an interest in marketing? What was how did that evolve?
So I often tell people that how I got to marketing is actually a story of how many things I failed at and how many things I was bad at. So I already talked about music. And after leaving the music conservatory, I ended up playing in bands. The one thing I'm good at music, I'm not a great, saxophone player. I'm not going to be one of the best saxophone players in the world. But what I am good at is kind of picking up new instruments. So I picked up a lot of new instruments and ended up playing in bands in college and thought maybe I could do that. And we never quite made it. And then so I thought maybe, being creative, I'd try writing because I was been in a lot of theater and acting and that type of thing. I was like, I'm going to try writing. So I wrote a bunch of scripts, submitted them to production companies, got no interest.
Wow.
And so the one job I ended up getting, which is the job I probably shouldn't have gotten, was a computer programming. So this was right around the year 2000. And so I was immediately sent out to go fix, if you remember, the Y2K vulnerability that everyone was worried about.
Absolutely.
And, fortunately, I don't think I was good enough to actually make a difference because if I was making a difference, I probably was taking away from the effort to fix the vulnerabilities. But the Y2K vulnerability did not happen. And so I take some credit, some small credit,
sure,
but essentially
rightfully
figured
so.
out that's not something that I want to do. I was not very good at it. But kind of knowing that I really like creative work, that's how I kind of ended up falling into marketing because it is this kind of field where, creativity is part of it, but you're not actually the person creating the idea necessarily. You're kind of the person who's trying to drive the idea or inspire the idea and then recognize something that could be interesting. But there's also this real analytical part of it. So there was a part of me, even though I was very bad at computer programming, that did have somewhat of an analytical mind as well. And so that combination is what ended up getting me into marketing. And I landed my first marketing job at Kraft Foods in Chicago.
craft foods in Chicago. And then that ultimately became a marketing job at Purina.
Correct. Yes.
In St.
Pet
Louis.
food. Yep. Moved to St. Louis and was at Nestle Purina for about 10 years. And so quite a while there. In fact, we had thought we might just stay there until this opportunity came knocking from New Belgium, which ultimately ended up just being too hard to pass up.
Sure. And, I didn't mention this at the beginning. Of course, Shaun is now the CEO of New Belgium. However, he started as the director of marketing.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
And I will never forget getting an email from the then CEO, Steve.
Yep.
And it was such a well-worded email. It was so kind. It was so nice. But how I read that email was, Greg, really important potential hire is considering accepting a position with us at New Belgium. He is going to be coming into town with his family. I'd like you to show him around, tour houses, get him familiar with Fort Collins. Don't mess it up was kind of like the underlying message that I interpreted from the email was, don't mess this up for us. So my OCD kicks in. I recall going through the car wash 3 consecutive times prior to meeting you and Stephanie and the kids and going on that first tour. And when I met you, all of the nerves, all of the anxiety kind of melted away because this guy's young. I was envisioning this really intimidating older person, and you were young and kind, and Stephanie was so kind. And we just had this really, really great time kind of doing that. And I've always, been curious. We haven't really talked about it, going all the way back to that point in time. You had this amazing job at Purina. You were happy in St. Louis. You had a great place there. The family was happy. Everything was good. What sold you on Fort Collins? Because I know it was an amazing opportunity at New Belgium, of course, but I know it was also knowing you, also about your family and about them being happy. So what sold you on the area?
Well, and if you remember, the toughest critic by far was not Stephanie or myself. It was our daughter,
without question,
who immediately told you that, her name for Fort Collins was Fart Collins because that's how bad it was in her mind. But when you probed a bit more, if you remember, the biggest underlying issue for her was whether or not there was good enough chicken tenders and ranch dressing.
Right.
And so once we were able to alleviate that a bit, that kind of brought her along a bit more.
Am I remembering this right? I remember her in the back seat saying, I bet they don't even have chicken nuggets here.
Correct. That was her big concern.
She was really down.
Are they going to have tendies? And so we were able to kind of answer that question and get her on the way. But I think, to your point, I looked at a number of different opportunities, even though as you said, I was really happy in St. Louis and my job at Purina, but you're always kind of seeing what's out there, especially if you've been at a company for quite a period of time. And so I looked at some other opportunities where, bigger cities, so Seattle, Los Angeles, Boston, and it just didn't quite feel right. It just thought it'd be a really tough move for our kids, particularly, but just kind of some of the challenges that living in a big city again would have for us after having lived for quite a period of time in Chicago. And so I think, it's interesting because I had another CEO in town last week and I was showing him around. He had never been to Fort Collins. And it was interesting to kind of relive what brought me to Fort Collins through his eyes. And he's a retail apparel executive. So really thinks about real estate and particularly commercial real estate. And walking around Old Town, it was like, where are all the big box stores? I don't get this. Who are these storefronts? This doesn't make any sense. It's vibrant. There's no vacancies. This is an incredible area. Like, do you know what you have here? And I said, well, yeah, but you're reminding me. So I do think Old Town was the thing that really, when both Stephanie and I kind of first experienced that, said, ooh, wow, this is somewhere where we could live. Along with, I think you think about, we were coming from an area. We're not, if you look at this is really not built for heat and humidity. This is a face that is meant for cool weather. So the lack of humidity here, the sunshine, And then really the walkability. That's the thing we loved about where we lived in St. Louis is the walkability, bikeability. Were the things that I think really, wanted us, to kind of move here and said, yeah, this is something we could see ourselves doing. Now, embarrassingly enough as well, our kids couldn't ride bikes when they moved here. You think like, oh, they were 3 and 1. No, they were 10 and 8, and didn't ride bikes, didn't know how to ride bikes. And so in some ways it was like moving here, we can actually see them riding bikes. You're not driving through huge amounts of traffic. This is going to be a great opportunity for them to actually kind of have that more kind of small town kind of upbringing.
Right. I love that. And yeah, the weather, I can relate. You're growing up in Iowa. We know what the humidity is like in the Midwest. And I think we appreciate it more than anybody else around here.
Yes, we definitely do. And the lack of mosquitoes.
The lack of bugs. It's amazing. In 300 days of sunshine a year, it's awesome. That kind of brings me to the outdoor patio at New Belgium. We've talked about this a lot. I've always taken clients there. I've taken family there, friends there. It's a special place to connect with people. Now, a lot of breweries, and there are other breweries in Fort Collins, there are other places to go in Fort Collins that have nice patios, nice outdoor spaces, but there's something different about New Belgium. So this brings me to my market research that I alluded to prior to our recording. I thought, what is it? I'm going to go there with a singular question on my mind. What is it that makes it different? So, I started my market research. I drank a beer. Then
it's a good place to start.
Drank another beer, just checking it out, looking around. And here's the one thing I came up with. It's that the people serving the beer, they seemed to me to be truly and authentically enjoying themselves. They seem to me to be choosing to be there above anywhere else at that moment in time. One was having a conversation next to me. There was the Top Gun, like some song from the Top Gun soundtrack was playing, and he and another person were talking about the movie Top Gun, and just like authentically interacting with the people. It was fun. And that is a difference between, I think it starts there, and that's a difference. It kind of spreads, and it just is the community. It just is this amazing place. And I guess the question is, how did you get there? How did you achieve that? And now you're the CEO. How do you maintain that going forward?
Yeah, that's a kind of pressure-filled question. So I think, what I talk about in terms of how did it start or how did it get there, it really goes all the way back to the roots of kind of where the brewery was inspired, which was Belgium. Mm-hmm. And if you go to Belgium, it's a little different now because there's just so many tourists that, kind of go everywhere. But if you go to a Belgian brewery, you can call them up the day before and say, hey, I'm kind of interested in, especially if you come from the beer industry at all, hey, I'm interested in kind of seeing what you do. And they're going to bring you in. They're going to take you everywhere, show you everything in an open book type of way. And they're going to want to taste beer with you and talk about the beer. And so that kind of mentality, which is, I think, our co-founder, Jeff, when he went on his Belgium trip that really inspired the brewery in the first place, that's what he experienced. And so that from the start was something that they were going to bring back, Kim and Jeff, the two co-founders, to New Belgium. And so from very early on, there were free tasters. And so that's how it started, was we just had a couple seats and people, hey, we want to show you the beer. We're trying to build this thing called craft beer. Come on in. Let us talk to you about it. Let us tell you why we're excited about it. And so that kind of from the co-founder perspective has really, kind of created that environment across the entire company. And so we've, since moved on from just come on in and get free tasters. But what hasn't changed is we built a whole tour program, which we're really proud of, has multiple times won best tour in America. And it goes back to what you were talking about. The people who are giving that tour are so passionate about the company, are so passionate about what we do, the beers we make, that comes through in that tour in such a powerful way that it's not just like, okay, this is where you mesh the malt in. who cares? It's like, it's nice, but what really matters is kind of the heart behind the story. And again, to your point, like what people are kind of putting out there from their excitement to share the stories of kind of where we've come as a company. And so that tour is still free. Like there's obviously kind of paid tours now. You can go more behind the scenes, more expansive, all that, but there's still a free tour that you can sign up for. Anybody in the public can. And we have beer samples along that tour. And so that tradition, that spirit lives on. And I think what's really powerful, and we talk about this a lot, is obviously as we built out this space to, from a couple seats now to this, pretty sizable patio, we talk about the idea of like, yeah, we're a business. We're here to make money, but that can't come at the expense of the experience. And that's, kind of where my job comes in. Mm-hmm. When we get to a place where, somebody asks a question of like, hey, should I give a taster if somebody wants to taste something, or should I charge them for it? We go, well, what's the right answer if we're trying to create the right experience? Because that ultimately is kind of the most important thing we're going to do. Certainly, again, we want to make money. We can't lose a whole bunch of money in that space. But first and foremost, it's an experience. And I think as long as that idea comes through, and again, I continue to hear that from people who have that experience time and time again, whether it's a tour or just hanging out on the patio, that's the interaction that they have with the people who work in what we call our liquid center, our tap room, again and again, which is just, it makes me so proud. It's such a remarkable thing to see. And you see it even from somebody who's worked there 6 months. A lot of times you would think, oh, that person's been there 10 years. Of course, they can speak passionately about the stories and talk to you about beer. 6 months in, somebody will be able to do that, which is pretty remarkable.
I think that's incredibly rare. And, it just makes me think like, how do you find these people? Well, by the way, before you answer that, if you're listening to this, I get asked a lot, hey, I'm going to be in Fort Collins this weekend. A lot of times it's from somebody like I think I was mentioning to you earlier, the head rowing instructor at West Point Academy that retired last month and bought a home in Fort Collins. She's going to get up every day and row the 6-mile long Horsetooth Reservoir. And, but I'm getting asked, what should I do? Like, what's a good itinerary? What hike should I go on? How can I really pack a lot into my weekend? And my first recommendation is always the tour at New Belgium. And if you're listening to this, you just heard Shaun talk about it. And I'm telling you, the tour at New Belgium, you've got to do it.
Yeah.
Work it in, check out their website, get the details. Now, swinging back to how you find these people, because that was something I was going to bring up too. You're right. You would expect that level of maybe passion, of knowledge of the product from somebody who's been there 10 years. But at New Belgium, you do see that from the people that have clearly, they just have it. They have like something is there. They haven't been there that long, but they know everything about the product. They're passionate about it. They're incredibly personable. How do you find these people, and how does Fort Collins play a part in recruiting them to New Belgium?
Yeah, I think when we think about bringing people into Belgium, in some ways, our reputation precedes us. So do we have that advantage where people kind of are drawn to the company, and it is hard to get a job at the company because so many people want that job. And so, we don't take that for granted at all. That's a really powerful thing. But I think we really try to cast a broad net so that we're not just looking for somebody who has experience in the hospitality industry, or somebody who's, worked as a bartender or worked as a server. We're looking for just a really broad group of people, and really trying to understand what motivates them as people, how they think about the world. And so it's not just hey, this is a job that you can replace, you can now work at this bar instead of that bar. We're looking for somebody who's looking to do this in a different way than just kind of like, well, it's here and I can get the hours I want, or those types of considerations. And so it's that type of thing that we're looking for. I think the other thing I will say, and this is one of the challenges we have, and I know this is something you think about a lot as well, is that as great as this community is, and it's great and it's drawing so many people, one of the things we are struggling with as a company that employs a lot of people in the Fort Collins area is affordability. And I think, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you could start in our liquid centers and you could live in Fort Collins. You could afford to do that. And now it's getting harder and harder to do that. And so I think that's something that, people in this community who really care about this community are going to have to think about what are the answers to that. Because that is a challenge as we continue to bring in more people who are also drawn to the same thing, that same types of things that I was drawn to move here in the first place.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the number one challenge for people coming in here. It's into Fort Collins to work for great companies like New Belgium is affordability, and it's something that's being addressed. It's going to take some time, but you're successfully recruiting these people here, and it's fun to see. It's impressive to see. And talking about the culture a little bit and the vibe at the patio, that's all really, really fun and interesting. And I also think let's talk about the product a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about, we were having dinner, my wife, Sarah, and I, and you and Stephanie, after a comedy show at the Lincoln Center. And you said these words to me. You said, we have these new juice forward beers. And I didn't even know what that meant. You did a great job of explaining. Of course, you're well qualified. And I went out and I tried it. The first one I tried was the one that's sitting right here. Dominga. Loved
It's a good one. That's a good one.
I think maybe my two favorite summer beers are sitting right here, Dominga, and you have the summer lime lager also. But this juice forward movement, explain that to the listeners, because I think a lot of people, when they hear juice forward, what does that mean? And that's been a big part of kind of what you've been up to lately, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll kind of talk about it in two ways. I think one of the things we're seeing, in the evolution of beer is that, you're constantly having turnover in the category because new people are turning 21 and they're coming into the category. And so you just see these shifts as generations, become legal drinking age adults, what they're interested in, kind of what their background was, how they grew up, what were some of the things that were driving their flavor profiles. And so one of the things we think about, and you hear this a lot, is this idea of the juice box generation, where kids grew up with high flavor kind of products, whether it be juice or water, soda, those types of things. And that's really influenced the types of things they're now thinking about. If they're looking to have an alcoholic beverage, they're looking for some of those same types of flavor profiles. So that's certainly one driver. But then I think the other piece, and this really applies to the IPA category, is that, in the beginning, there was IPA and it was very bitter. And that was kind of considered West Coast is where a lot of those IPAs were created. But you had this like very piney, resinous type of flavor. And those beers are awesome in their own way. But about 10 or 15 years ago, there was a new style of IPA that was developed, which was more of a hazy IPA, which came more from the East Coast, or it's associated with the East Coast. And that style of IPA was much less bitter. It was cloudier. And so it was much more drinkable. It was less, you wouldn't go, ooh, wow, that's really puckery. And so much more fruit flavor would come through. So flavors like citrus or tropical elements, because of the hops that were used, that's kind of the flavor profile that started coming through more so than a piney kind of resinous flavor. And people really like that. And so you kind of put that combination of hazy IPAs really became the leading IPA style in the category, with then this idea of people really wanting bigger flavors, bolder flavors. And we essentially in Belgium kind of put those two together and said, okay, hazy IPA, very sessionable, drinkable type of, not going to be bitter and give me that pucker face. But what if we can amp up the juice flavor even more than maybe a traditional hazy IPA? What would that look like? And turns out people really like that.
You amped it up.
We amped it up. And so Juice Force has become the second best-selling IPA in the country, behind only Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA.
Oh, that's great. If you're listening to this in the summer months, this is, Dominga is the grapefruit Paloma flavor, ale with agave, golden lime, and grapefruit lime extracts. It's incredible. Highly, highly recommend it. What else are you working on that you can discuss that you're excited about? What movements? I mean, what does the future look like in the product category? Is there anything that you can talk about, want to talk about is in terms of, where the focus is at now?
I think really when you think about the category and the stuff that we're working on, without getting in anything specific, because I can't reveal all of the details, but I think that idea, and you're seeing this generally across the entire alcoholic beverage industry, is there's this kind of blurring of lines is the way that I've heard it described, where you just see things like, is that a wine? Is that a cocktail? Is that a beer? What is that? And that's the thing that I think people are really getting excited about, because it lends to this idea of experimentation and exploration that people who are coming into the category, I think, are looking for, of like trying to find what their drink is going to be, what the thing is that they're going to like the most. And so I think that's what we continue to work on is, Juice Force, again, just kind of going back to that example, was an example where we really kind of mashed together in a very strange way, kind of a high octane IPA with a seltzer in some ways. Like those flavor profiles kind of came together in a really interesting way. So that's kind of what we kind of continue to look at, our opportunities, kind of blend things together, blur lines in ways that maybe are unexpected to create entirely new flavors.
I love that. I'm excited. That got me excited. Okay. It really did. It honestly did. So let's do some rapid fire questions here too.
Okay.
Because, you've been there over 6 years now, right?
Yep. Yes.
So, you've got kids. What types of things what's your favorite thing? You have a weekend, there's nothing on the calendar, which is probably like never happens, right? With the kids and all of these things you have going on. But let's pretend nothing planned for the weekend. You and Stephanie and Grady and Nora, what do you do? What's the agenda? Like, what does a fun day, a fun weekend day in Fort Collins look like?
So there's a couple breakfast spots we really like. Silver Grill or Lucille's. Feel like you can't go wrong with either of those. But depending on what my daughter wants from a cinnamon roll perspective, will drive that decision. It's funny because I'm now thinking about it. It's like, we're very food motivated, I suppose.
Same. That's where I would have gone too. Probably maybe those same two places actually also.
But I think we also, maybe as an alternative, the Lyric is one of our favorite places. And so the Saturday morning cartoons is just an awesome time.
Explain that to me real quick, because Sarah and I have seen that and we've talked about taking our kids there. It's been a while. I think we just lost track of it. But what does that look like?
So they have a whole cereal bar set up that you can kind of just go and pull what you want from a sugary cereal kid, paradise perspective.
A cereal bar. You choose your own cereal.
Choose your own cereal.
Okay.
And then you go in and they are playing all the old, very violent Tom and Jerry and Looney Tunes style cartoons, which is great because our kids and any kid, I think, from today's generation will say like that they actually put that on TV. Was that allowed? It's like, yep, right. That was. So that's a great time from a morning perspective. Trying to think of then what would we do next? From a lunch perspective, maybe something like if we were feeling adventurous, going up to Mishawaka and having lunch there over the river. That's always a great time. And then as you start getting into, maybe because I've got to say it because it's the first place to have Fat Tire on tap in Fort Collins, the Town Pump. So maybe that would just be a Stephanie and I stopping by Town Pump for Fat Tire.
Pause right there for a second. So taking a step back, Mishawaka, that's up the Poudre Canyon.
Yes.
They have a restaurant there. You can get New Belgium there, enjoy a beer while you're sitting right by the river. You can watch a show, hang out, go up there in the afternoon. Like you just mentioned, maybe you hang out for a bit longer and get tickets to a show. It's kind of cool. They bus people up to shows in the Mishawaka from Colorado State University from CSU campus. Yep. My wife and I have done that a number of times. They take you up there, they take you back. It's this amazing shuttle service. There, everybody talks about Red Rocks. In Red Rocks is amazing.
Yeah.
Our favorite place is Mishawaka. It's just this like kind of mom and pop feel. And you're watching, we went to the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band a year or two ago, and we got to see them play. They're just, the backdrop is the raging river, the Poudre River. You see the rocks in the background. You might see a few antelope scurry across in the back. There is not a better place to just, enjoy a show, enjoy a beer. So that's the Mishawaka. And, it just kind of letting people know kind of what that's about. Some of these places people might not know.
I'm just throwing it out like a local now.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Mish. Is that a Mish?
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of the people listening, they might be, there's so many people, we talked about it again before we started recording, that are considering Fort Collins. It's on their radar, and they're learning, and they're learning so much about it. So,
yeah. And it's one of those things that I was kind of saying earlier, but it's a place you just have to come and see. Again, Mishawaka is a place you just have to go and see. It's very hard to describe. Mm-hmm. And say, oh yeah, this is what it's like. It's like, no, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm sure it's nice, river, whatever. Then you see it, you're like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
I mean, it's incredible, and it's incredible, and you have to do a little bit of digging to get the details on it, to kind of like figure out what's what. But I interrupted your perfect day. I just wanted to.
I thought you were interrupting me to talk more about the Town Pump. You wanted to go deep.
Well, let's talk about that one next too.
Let's talk about what we do at Town Pump. So
we should talk about that too, because people don't know who don't live here. They don't know what the Town Pump is either. Yeah. The Town Pump, you probably know more about it than I do, but it's this small. I mean small, like
very small.
I don't know how many people fit in there, like 7. I don't know.
I think a little more than that, but it feels like maybe 7.
It's very comfortably. How close to somebody else do you want to be? But it is this small bar that has all of this history in the heart of Old Town Fort Collins. What's your experience like there? Why do you enjoy going to the Town Pump?
Well, there's so much history from a New Belgium perspective. As I was saying, that was the first bar in town that put Fat Tire on tap.
What year was that? Any idea?
It was 1991-ish.
Okay.
Like that's when the company, was founded. And so it was right around that time frame. And it's funny because I've talked quite a bit with Kim Jordan, our co-founder, and she literally was delivering kegs in a station wagon to Town Pump, which is amazing. But in addition to that, it has what they call toxic cherries, which are cherries, I believe, soaked in grain neutral spirits of some kind, which taste delicious, but are quite potent, the name should tell you.
Right.
But, oftentimes you have a Fat Tire, you say, oh yeah, I'll have a toxic cherry. You go, that's delicious. Maybe I'll have another one. And then, 30 minutes later, your legs feel a little rubbery.
Sure.
So yeah, that's a great spot. I love to bring everyone to, because it's such a, historic place for us to kind of come in and see that original Fat Tire tap, and get that served right there is pretty incredible.
It's such a cool place. Definitely a place people should put on their list if they're visiting Fort Collins.
Yes. I'm just taking people on a drinking and food tour. I realize this is not good.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what they're looking to do a lot of times. You could. What else? So, what else in your perfect day? Anything else come to mind?
So, one of our favorite places, because it's near our house, is Nick's. One of my favorites. That would be our dinner spot. We all love going there because we can walk there. But then maybe I'll throw out another non-food place. Maybe this is again just the adults, maybe not the kids, but is Comedy Fort. Which is just a really, really great venue, again, here on College Avenue in Old Town. And it's surprisingly, this is what I think about both our music and art scene just in general, is that, we don't get the biggest names, but we get really good people and acts coming through this town. And every time I've been to the Comedy Fort probably 10 times, 15 times, I've never seen a bad comedian, which is a lot to say. Opening acts are good.
Well, we're getting bigger and bigger names as you're mentioning that. I'm thinking to myself that you're right. But we get the names when they're on their way up.
Yeah.
If you've heard of Nate Bargatze, my personal favorite, he's a legend. He is, I can't even breathe when I watch him do comedy. And he's one of he might be the biggest guy on the national circuit right now.
Yeah.
But he came through Fort Collins 3-4 years ago on the way up.
Yep.
So guys like that, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that's what's exciting I think about this town again, because the biggest of the big acts, like Taylor Swift is not probably coming through Fort Collins, Denver is probably going to be the spot for her, but those up and coming acts who are about ready to break nationally, that's who we tend to get. And then we have these great venues to see them in, which is, really awesome.
Right. And I mean, Denver's only an hour away too. So if you want to see Taylor Swift, that's an hour.
See Taylor Swift.
Yeah, it's an hour. I mean, you can make that happen really easily, which is kind of, a lot of people don't realize when we're talking about Fort Collins, it's 1 hour away from Denver, away from DIA, an international airport. You can go anywhere. So, that's a really good day, by the way. Like all of these things.
That was jam packed. I mean,
that was a really jam packed day.
Somebody would tell you that there's no way that all happens in one day. I'm much too much of a homebody for that all to happen in one day.
Oh no, that's great. Well, that's
like a dream day, maybe.
Yeah, that's a dream day. I mean, you just took people to a lot of the places, like a lot of the things that, and a few of those in there, like people don't really talk about, people don't really know. So I absolutely love that. I mean, if you were just thinking about Fort Collins, what's one thing that's just relatively unknown, maybe kind of underrated? Like I'm sure when you have an employee hire, they've done some research on Fort Collins, but what's one thing that you would tell them, one or two things, just, that they might not see or find when they're doing their research?
I mean, I'll just go back to, we were talking about the comedy for it, but I think the other thing just more broadly is the music scene in general. Mm-hmm. I think what Pat Stryker and the Bohemian Foundation have done in this town is remarkable. And when you think about it, just was at a show at Washington's on Friday night, absolutely incredible venue, again, to see acts that, aren't the biggest acts, but are the acts that, you might want to see, or, just things that are going to be coming to a bigger stage at some point.
Yeah. Who'd you see there?
Saw Bob Schneider from Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Awesome.
What kind of music?
He's kind of a weird guy, folk singer, songwriter, but also does country, does rap, does kind of mariachi. Mean, very wide range of things. He's just a prolific songwriter, but very cool act to see. But then you think about Foco MX. I mean, it's just an incredible event. I don't know of an event like that.
It's incredible.
Anywhere, so Foco MX is essentially they take over every bar. I mean, it's not even bars. It can be any place that's willing to host a music act. And they have music acts playing simultaneously for several days at, a ton of venues across town. And you buy a ticket and you just kind of hop around to see different bands. It's just, really special event. And so that's the thing I talk to people about. If you're into music, obviously we just had Taste of Fort Collins this weekend.
Big festival here.
Big festival.
Google Taste of Fort Collins. You'll see the details. Taste of Fort Collins is a big deal.
So I think just that, if you're into music, this is an incredible place to do that, because you're going to just see a ton of acts that you may not have gotten a chance to see because they might be smaller, less obvious, but they're going to be featured in really interesting ways at either festivals or venues around town that, are going to be really incredible experiences.
Yeah. Music and increasingly comedy.
Yes.
I think you mentioned Bob Schneider. Is his name? He's from Austin. I think there are so many parallels between Austin, Texas, maybe 15-ish years ago, and Fort Collins today. Yep. You look at the music scene, the comedy scene, just this downtown area, the tech sector. I mean, the largest public state university in the state being located here, all of the healthcare system, all of these parallels, really fascinating. Yeah. We don't have a million people yet.
Quite the traffic problem. So hopefully our infrastructure build out ends up being better.
Yeah. Just interesting parallels. And just seeing that scene, that's a really, really good thing to bring up, by the way, the music scene and the comedy scene. It's starting to be talked about more, but it still isn't talked about enough.
Yeah. It's a bit underground, which kind of makes it cool. I mean, it's kind of interesting because of that.
Yeah, I would agree. And speaking of events and just things to do, let's, summer 2024 here, what's coming up for New Belgium? Anything come to mind? Anything that we should put on our calendars that we should look forward to as we're starting to wrap up here?
Yeah, I'm going to have to look at my notes, but the one I'm not going to have to look at my notes for, because I want to get the dates right for people. The one I'm not going to have to look at my notes for is Tour de Fat. So, for people who don't know what Tour de Fat is, it's essentially, our love letter to Fort Collins. And it builds off really the foundation of how our company was started, which was it started on a bike. And so if you don't know the story of New Belgium, our co-founder, Jeff, went on a bike tour through Belgium, visiting breweries and getting inspired by this style of brewing that he ultimately decided to bring back to the United States, because it wasn't really established in a significant way, and thought he could bring something really unique to the beer space. And so that idea of riding bikes has been central to kind of the company and our ethos since day one. And, 15, 20 years ago, somebody had the idea of like, what if we make an entire event around bikes? And so there's a huge bike parade, 10, 15,000 people. The city of Fort Collins essentially shuts down for the day. It's a holiday for all intents and purposes. We have a 2-hour bike parade through the city, which then culminates back at the brewery for several concerts that go, through the rest of the afternoon. Huge event. And again, it's just something that we're really proud of, that when we talked about earlier about the experience and what we're trying to do from a tour perspective, or what we're trying to do from our tasting room perspective, that event is very much in line with that as well. It helps to sponsor and support nonprofit organizations around the community, particularly those focused on bikes. But it's really just an opportunity to kind of bring the community together in a way to celebrate kind of Fort Collins itself, and the role that Fort Collins has played in New Belgium, and kind of where that company has been able to go.
And if somebody wants to participate in Tour de Fat, if that's a question, the first thing is that they can. It's open to everybody.
It's open to everyone.
Wear a costume.
Yes.
The first time I participated, I was kind of that boring guy that I thought, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Let me tell you, you're going to feel real out of place if you are not bringing the fun and wearing a costume, and just wear a costume.
Yeah. That it was a very important a point to make there. And my wife would be very disappointed, because she's a costume aficionado. We have an entire bin of costumes. I am less of a costume person, so for me, it's more about the bike. But I agree, you got to get into the spirit and put on the costume to kind of fully immerse yourself in what Tour de Fat really is. So
Halloween
that is
in the middle of summer, basically.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Kind of like, it's a little bit like that, with just fun costumes and music. And I lived just off of Mountain Avenue in Old Town for almost 8 years, and always looked forward to. I mean, we would just walk out, and everyone had the front yard parties going. Yep. And everyone is so gracious. Growing up in Iowa, I remember in the Midwest, there's a big bike race called Ragbri, if you've ever heard of that, or anybody who's done that. But you go through the state of Iowa, and everybody opens up their house. It's just Midwest hospitality for these people on this long bike ride. And Tour de Fat has a similar theme there. Yep. All of these places, all these homes are opening up their front yard parties, at least, and and sometimes other parts of their homes to people. It's really fascinating to see the community come together and just have a great time. I mean, for like the entire day, and then, like you said, celebrate a New Belgium after the parade.
Yes. So that's August 24th.
What time?
I want to get the date right.
Yeah.
I believe it starts in the morning. I think it's like 10 a.m., but check our website to get the actual deets. I don't want to get that wrong. So that's August 24th. Then 2 other events to kind of just mention to you, because they're related. One is the Foco Fondo, which is a road bike race. And as they tell me, I went to this last year. It's awesome. It ends up back at the brewery again. But this is a more serious, no costumes probably, although some people might, who are more intense. But the mileage is a little different. So if I look at my notes here, there are different options. There's a 12-mile, 32, 60, 100, and 188-mile ride.
188 miles.
Yes. So this is the thing I learned when I moved to Fort Collins is generally you want to be careful if somebody asks you if you do something. Do you like to road bike? Be careful with that answer.
Be careful with that. You're right.
What they think about road bikes is going to be very different than what you think about road bikes.
It doesn't mean what it means in the Midwest.
No.
For example, it means let's go do 188 miles in the sun.
I will not be doing that level. Perhaps the 12 mile.
Should we do the 12 miler together?
I'm happy to do that.
That's
a nice casual ride, but that's a great event. Again, tons of different companies on site, tons of food, music. It's a great event. And then lastly, just because I mentioned Washington's really cool event we've been doing the last couple of years. It's a joint concert that we do held at the brewery, but promoted from Washington's. We have 2 concerts back-to-back nights on July 30th and July 31st. And so that is
Washington's July 30th and July 31st.
But it's Washington's finds the acts, but the acts are actually at New Belgium.
Okay.
So you buy your tickets through Washington's, but the event is actually an outdoor event at New Belgium's brewery.
How can we find details on that? If you Google Washington's Fort Collins, will it come up on their site?
Yes, it will. Yes.
Okay.
So St. Paul and the Broken Bones, apparently an old school funk band, and then Cameron Marlowe are the 2 acts. And people, I'm not super familiar with either one, but I've heard awesome things about it from people like, oh my God, you don't know. This is incredible.
Wow.
So it's a great time.
That sounds amazing. But swinging back to that bike race, whether it's 12 miles or 188 or those distances in between, whatever you might be up for, I guess, however much spandex you're going to wear that day. What are the details? How do you find the details? How do you get involved in that? Do we have dates? I want to hammer that home so people can go check this out. Yeah.
So that's July 21st. You should be able to find details either through the New Belgium website, newbelgium.com, or through Foco Fondo is the other place. So it's FOCOFONDO.com.
Okay. Those are 3 really good ones.
Yes.
I mean, those last 2, I've lived here since 2006. I haven't heard of those or participated in those. And I like cycling. Not going to do the 188 miler. Might push myself and try the 100 miler. I mean, that sounds exciting.
There are some serious riders who are riding at that distance level. Right. That's for professional riders, essentially.
Right. No costumes.
No costumes.
In that 100 to 188 mile range. In particular, no costumes, I would imagine. Well, those are great, Shaun. No, thank you. And I want to mention this too. It's when we had lunch a while back. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
The food truck.
Yes.
Sitting out of New Belgium. Yep. And you were interviewing at the time for the CEO position. And one thing that I just noticed that I thought was really interesting and neat was that it seemed to me like every single person that walked by our table took the time to stop and say hello to you. Like the feeling was, this is one of us, and at the time you were the director of marketing at a big position there. So one thing that I've always recognized in you is humility and kindness. And I got to see that just on full display in that moment. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what do I know about anything? But I'm just rooting for this guy. I hope he gets this. And I was thrilled. I think I sent you a text message when you got this. And you're like, how did you know already? And I'm like, oh, someone told me.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was so cool because I think you represent, I can't think of anybody more passionate about New Belgium, more passionate about the product, but also more passionate about the people and humble and just right there caring about everybody. So an amazing, just to me, kind of representation of kind of what Fort Collins is about, not just what New Belgium is about. And it just couldn't be better. I'm humbled that you took the time to do this with me. You have a lot of things on your calendar, and I know you need to get out of here to the next meeting, but I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you. And are you going to be at Paddle Battles tomorrow, our pickleball tournament?
I'm going to try.
You're going to try?
I'm going to try.
Okay. I'm going to text you.
Okay.
I'm going to remind you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time. And everybody, if you want to learn more about New Belgium, you can find a lot about New Belgium online, but you really need to experience it in person. So when you're in Fort Collins, just check it out. Put it at the top of your list. And until next time, thank you, Shaun. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.